felt it would give us the best access to the strongest possible group of senior insurance decision makers.
InsurTech Insights is a must-do conference, I think, for the network that is built here.
Okay, so a year later, we were all up here on the stage last year talking about GenAI and how quickly it has progressed a year ago, but wow, a big progression over the last year. So let's get started. So the pace of advancement we talked about last year has really continued. It's been really unbelievable at the capabilities that you're able to kind of do with GenAI. And now we're moving into agentic AI. And that pace and that level of adoption, which is varied within the industry, it's become much more targeted, though, rather than saying it's going to be the end all. And it has strong business value. Share what you have seen and experienced this last year, and do you think that pace is going to continue? Bob, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. Bob Pick, Tokyo Marine Group. So we definitely have seen a rise of interest in agentic and also solutions coming out there. Interestingly, when agentic first started getting big, those many 12 months ago, there was a heavy emphasis on autonomous. That's sort of dropped away a little bit. I do think it'll come back, but the autonomous nature of it created some issues that we all have in the industry, which is auditability and being able to show your work, and ultimately the accountability that we have for underwriting and claims decisions that are being made. It's still the human that has to be in the loop, on the loop, around the corner, just kind of watching things that needs to be there. But I am very bullish on where agentic can go in the future, because it allows us to decompose, instead of having a blob process and one model, many models that are tuned for particular steps in a process. I often use claims. A claims adjuster sometimes has to be a lawyer, sometimes a doctor, sometimes an auto mechanic. Having all that in one model is really rough. Agentic techniques allow us to set a context, use one model for one step, maintain and enrich that context, carry it through. That, to me, that sounds a lot more like AI that is applicable to processes we actually operate in the real world, versus the, what the more typical use is currently of AI, or generative AI, which is summarization, references, document comparison, research, those things, which are all valuable, but not quite getting us into the transaction flow of our regulated world.
So Manish, we're 2 years into product updates, leveraging GenAI across our solutions. Talk about the pace and how you've had to kind of adapt and really kind of take advantage of what's coming out.
Yeah, I mean, last time we met here a year ago, we were still explaining what GenAI is. Mm-hmm. I think most people were still kind of on fence. I think that we settled that debate anymore. Like, we know that AI is landed and is here to stay for sure. But then there is a seismic shift, as Bob mentioned, is while we are still trying to, as an industry, take advantage, which GenAI has a lot to offer in terms of simplifying the insurance, business, and improving the customer services and generating efficiencies and productivity. I think there is a new step function improvement through agentic AI, which actually ensures that now we have an AI that doesn't just generate the content, it actually knows how to reason. While it is still growing up and it's still evolving, I think it's very promising in terms of its ability to reason, and more so like a specialized role that we as human play, and be a more of a goal-seeking autonomous intelligence that can help you still with the human in the loop, but improve that efficiency at a scale that we have not seen, which will really impact an operating models per se, and that will lead to a major transformation of the industry.
And Jim, you guys are having to keep pushing and pushing. It's been a big change for you guys this last year too. You're even partnering with Grok now.
Yeah, look at us. One of the things I think as we look at the sort of the curve, and I'm gonna pick up on what Manish said. A year ago, we were still trying to explain what is this generative thing. I'll pull that forward. 4 months ago, if anybody here in the room, and I won't ask for a show of hands, carries an iPhone. 4 months ago, if you went to a Safari browser and typed in the word agentic, it would autocorrect to genetic. So we're at a spot on that curve where we're still on the learning what the heck is this thing curve. And But that said, pulling in something Bob has said as well, from the construct of the impact that AI can have. Generative AI was a fantastic moment for all of us in the industry because it enabled us to take a skill that is a pain in the neck for people to go do. Create content, understand, interpret things. That is a human skill. That's what this capability brings us. What agentic AI does is it enables us to have context and combine skills. Because we can combine skills, the potential impact is enormous because it means we can now attack processes, and both of you have referenced that. Fundamental challenge, though, is that if I'm going to change a process, I have to change what I'm trying to do, I have to really get good at what are my outcomes, and I have to really understand from a technology perspective, but also from a human perspective, who are the people I'm impacting? What is the culture I need to have to be able to execute on it? So while agentic, as a move for us, is incredibly important, and we're pivoting our company towards this model and this operating model, we know, or we're seeing, and we're seeing it with our customers, that it will probably take a little longer for us to roll out things, but the impact will be, if we thought generative AI was a huge impact, agentic AI is a foundational impact, and I think that's the big change we're seeing. But it is incredibly early days on that.
Yeah. So, Manish, you kind of talked about the operational value. There was a BCG report back in April that noted that to achieve anticipated high levels of return, management teams must recognize they're embarking on a functional transformation, operational transformation. And the success depends on substantive changes to the operating model. That's something that you've kind of really focused in on, from an operational perspective. What are the use cases that are going to drive real value? Talk about, what are some of those business processes, those use cases, and what kind of results are you seeing, and what kind of progress has there been since last year?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty straightforward answer in my view. Insurance, even though we're digitized, we highly dependent on now digital paper. We still need paper, and all those papers are resulting into a lot of manual process. If you are starting from submissions, if you are starting for claims, even invoices, payments, there is still a tremendous amount of document-based processing that is actually happening throughout the insurance life cycle. There was not a very good answer until now. We had niche solutions until now where it can either address a specific function, specific workflow, or it can just work in siloed but not very well connected with a point of sale, point of service systems. I think we have a hope now, and that hope is that we can have agents that have a vision, which means that they can read those documents in the form, in the context of the insurance processes and the workflows that are more commonly understood and applied, and act in an autonomous manner with an oversight from the human being, with an auditability, traceability, to be responsible and match the regulatory compliance requirements. The beauty of those things is agentic is not a one swoop transformation, and that's what I like about it. I think agentic is an incremental transformation. You don't have to have an army of agents to start with it. You need to pick the impactful use case that can actually improve the velocity of the business, the customer turnaround time, or in general, just an operational efficiency. And then you start with one agent, and in no time, I think you can have more and more agents as you get more comfort with it, as you get more results and learning behind that. And I think that's really where I think it will pick it up. And that's the beauty of the agentic AI, that you can start now with something small, something important, and start learning about it.
And Bob, a year ago, after this conference, you had me on one of your calls, and we were talking about GenAI to your global, organization, and you were going to start putting in place a group that would really help kind of facilitate. You thought it was going to take you a couple of years. You're already up and running with it, and obviously you're a partner with Majesco, but you're doing a lot more in the pace of that change. kind of talk about what you're seeing as some of the business value.
Yeah, absolutely, and shout out to Patrick Gallick, who is running that new AI hub for us around the globe. The pace of change that we see, not only with the kind of understanding, the level of understanding of generative AI and then all the offshoots, the most recent, and I think highly interesting is agentic and the concepts and methods surrounding that. But in general, this has created an opportunity to rethink our use of a variety of different techniques. Classic AI and ML is something that's sort of come back to the fore. Credit to generative AI for getting everybody thinking about automation again as being something that is not just RPA driven. And I think the analogies to RPA and the growth that Manish called out, while it's imperfect, when we look at RPA, the most difficult robot to get going is that first robot. And then you see a blossoming farm of robots. And yes, I did have a chief actuarial officer ask me once, seriously, where do we keep the robots? It's a thing, but that's an absolute true story. But once you have that, once you develop that little bit of muscle memory, absolutely, I think the expansion of that, the application of to new business challenges or opportunities comes much more easily and naturally. The one thing I would challenge a little bit, actually the only thing I would challenge a little bit in Manish's comment is auditability. I have not seen auditability. I've seen traceability, I've seen references, I've seen being able to footnote and bring up text. That's a little different than auditability, which in my mind is 5 years from now, a DOI or an auditor can come in and say, show me how you got that answer, and we can replay it and get that answer precisely. There's still a lot of give in generative AI, but I know that's going to be worked out. Once that's worked out, the applicability to different regulated transactions. Today, a lot of generative AI exists in our the unregulated parts of business, sales and marketing, creating of indications, kind of red, amber, green, that then go to a human underwriter for take. And there's nothing wrong with that. Perfectly good use, perfectly valid use. But once we get through auditability, which requires us to deal with drift, hallucination, by all those things, then all of a sudden the blossoming of different process points that we can use, I think that plays beautifully into the agentic methodology. But I completely agree with Jim's comment. A big part of this is people. The tech is, the old saw is the tech is easy, the people are difficult. In this case, no, the tech is still somewhat difficult and constantly changing. But putting that aside, it is the people and how they deal with the change, how their roles change. A quick example is, and I just wrote about this online a couple of weeks ago, the original version of Pac-Man in 1979 was 24K. All graphics, all business logic, everything, 24K machine code. The most recent version, commercial version of Pac-Man was 2018 or 19 for the PS4. It was 893 megs. 893 megs. In both cases, those packages were written by programmers or software engineers, but people of that title. However, the work they did, the methods they used, the job they have is unrecognizable, yet they are both software engineers in their time. I think when we apply that through the lens of generative AI and agentic AI to the roles that we have today, it's going to be that same degree of change. There's still going to be a claims adjuster, but they're going to work a little differently or a lot differently. But the fear factor that people have about jobs going away or things changing so fundamentally they get worried about, that's real. And we need to start more acutely addressing that, letting them know that just like the programmers, still programmers, but the job has changed massively in the 40 years. It's not going to take 40 years to change this time around.
So, Jim, let's kind of dive into that. Sure. There's a lot of promising use cases of agentic AI, and one of the things we talked about as we were prepping is how do we build trust with that auditability and the repeatability and the transparency. So, what do you see kind of coming forward, as you're kind of focused in across multiple industries, but in particular insurance that is highly regulated?
Yeah, and I think one of the challenges that we're faced, and we look at this a lot when we look at how is AI doing what we want it to do? Is any piece of technology doing what we want it to do? And building trust, we are an industry that is driven entirely on two things. It's on, do you trust us to actually pay when stuff goes badly? And can we actually assess it so that we're not going to lose our shirts, so that we are there to pay when things go badly. So understanding that fundamental model, if those are sort of the two basic constructs, one of the things that's built into that is inherently that the person's making the right decision. And to a certain extent, Bob, I want to challenge the auditability. You're right, it's not auditable yet, but I think we're genuinely getting close. And I think it's closer than we think, because as we structure, what agentic gives us the ability to do is to layer questions on each other and actually we can use agents to actually ask the question, did you get it right? If I reran this, what would it look like? The challenge with doing this construct of providing the same measure of auditability in these predictive models that we would have in the deterministic world is that it's really, really expensive right now to actually go in and say, I'm going to rerun those questions 4 or 5 times so I make sure I always get, if not the same answer, close enough. And I would challenge us, when we talk about auditing decisions we made when everything was manual back in the 1960s, when it was just, I would go to some person named Bob and Bob would make a decision, that auditability was, well, the audit of that was, well, what did Bob say? In some respects, I think we're at a spot now where we have to treat the application or the AI as the new Bob. No, I'm not taking your job, Bob, I promise.
It hurts a little.
I'm feeling it.
I get what you're saying.
I understand, yeah. But that idea of actually then saying, let's use these models to trace and track what decision did it make rather than did it make the right decision. Because then, that's a rethink of process a bit, but that's actually sort of how we potentially could get over into that trust model, where we can actually say, all right, there was a decision to be made, and if we decompose our processes enough, and the decisions are small enough, then it can get really highly consistent. And I think that's ultimately where we're going to see it go. Because what agentic gives us is this ability to decompose all of those heavy-duty, big, long, heavy processes that we would just pull a lever and say, that was underwriting, into 4 layers each with have 5 different things that are actually relatively cheap to assemble, but actually come up with basically the same result as that one big giant process. We break it down that way, then we can actually potentially get auditability and the trust we're looking for.
Can I just comment that I appreciate that, because I had not thought of it that way at all. And I completely, I mean, that's brilliant in that I think certainly my perspective and what I read and hear most in the marketplace is comparing generative AI audit to classic AI audit, algorithmic audit. Are you getting that numerically correct answer? But that's a really great lens, that it is more about auditing the process through which that decision was arrived at, which is like we would do with a human, as opposed to is the math correct? So that's actually shocking. No, from Microsoft. No, but seriously, that is a really interesting lens. So thank you for that. I just got to call a spade a spade. I never thought about that. So thank you.
Yeah, just to add to Jim's point though, and to take it to the next level, is you got to see it from this angle that these AI agents, they are constantly learning. So whether we like it or not, as the data evolves, as the experience evolves, as the feedback evolves, they're getting better. Auditing, we have to look at it from a little bit of a different lens, because audit inherently applies that there is a fixed set of very hard-coded algorithms and process in which that we have to do it. While the audit in this new world is really be able to be very well connected with traceability in terms of saying, how did this thing progress, and can I actually get a better line of sight on how that happened? Now, keep one thing in mind, that agents are not humans. They have a larger processing capacity and complexity in which that they can thrive. So I would not be surprised to have a compliance agents and auditing agents itself, in other ways, that AIs that is designed to actually audit the work that AI has done, or else we will be limited to, again, our capacity to consume data, which will not be apt with the capacity at which that data has been processed by things. So think of it saying that there will still be an AI we can tap into for auditability as well.
Manish, I think you're, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I think you're spot on. I think we're already starting to see the idea of, and we talk about this in a somewhat ham-fisted way when we say we have humans auditing agents, and we might start having, humans being managers of agents as though they were quasi-human, and then we might have agents managing other agents as though they were quasi-human talking to quasi-human, and potentially someday, an agent managing a human. No. But when you say agent managing human, it really translates to a check process that goes, did you do it right, DeMarco? But at the end of the day, we are seeing this maneuver toward, we're seeing the natural evolution in we've seen a couple carriers look at the idea of creating the quote-unquote audit agent, which will be just sort of monitoring throughout whatever that decision cycle looks like, and saying, did you get it right? Did you get it right? Did it stick to norms, and so forth? Not necessarily questioning the answer, which I think is the big distinction between what we would see with auditability and deterministic versus probabilistic. But that construct, I think that's happening faster than we might think it might happen.
And the major accounting firms are certainly working just on the financial audit side, but also controls audits. They're putting a lot of time and treasure into exactly that. Absolutely right. And at some point, this all becomes self-aware, and then our robot overlords come and, well, I welcome it.
And that really feeds into this whole concept that jobs are evolving and how jobs are going to be done and what's the role of jobs. And I think there's been a fear that AI and GenAI is going to take away jobs. That's not necessarily the case. It's really going to change the way that jobs are. And in fact, RBC Equity Research noted that GenAI within jobs will become a necessity, is what their statement was. And it will create new jobs and will increase the importance of professionals who use AI. Manish, I know you are kind of passionate about this concept of AI and GenAI and how it impacts jobs, and that it's a different kind of role. Why don't we start with you?
I mean, it's impacting jobs already. It's not a future state in my view. I think AI is a new necessity for any job, as similar to what used to be knowing spreadsheets or PowerPoint, Microsoft Office, or any other office, like that kind of capacity in which you have to work. Because every day, if somebody is going through their day without using an AI, I think they're leaving so much opportunity on the table. And as I said earlier also, and a lot of other people, smart people than me, have said this thing that AI will never take your job. It's the person who can use AI better will take your job. And I think that's one important aspect, that if anybody is not using AI in whatever they do, personal, professional, I think, get started, because I think everybody is in that curve, and you got to build that basic AI queue, so to speak, in doing what you do. I think the second piece is the social economic shift is going to happen, because the mundane task or easier task or repeatable task, I think it's going to be taken over by agents much faster than we all can imagine. I don't know whether you read this announcement or not, but McKinsey, which basically touts their expensive engagement deliverable as their decks, has actually now 100% creating the PowerPoint decks through the McKinsey way of writing decks trained AI. And they don't need some interns creating those decks on Sunday night. Those AIs are creating it. This is happening like today. We are seeing this thing across the industry. So the job profile is going to change, and at this point, we need experts, and we need to act as an experts and become the master of the craft or the art that we are actually want to be in, rather than just be the arms and legs of that.
Yep. Bob?
I have 15 one-liners associated with McKinsey AI-created decks. Among them, they have higher EQ than the human-created McKinsey decks, and they haven't dropped the price. So,
No.
But
That is true.
Apologies to any McKinsey alums that are in the audience. But no, I agree. I agree generally with that vision. What I would posit is that it's over a longer time frame.
Yeah.
I don't see this as 1 year in doom or 3 years in doom, but I would agree with everything you said over about a 5-year time frame. I still, in our token ring companies, I still see excellent underwriters with excellent efficiency who are not wringing hands and wondering how to integrate Copilot or ChatGPT in their day. It doesn't mean they're Luddites. It just means that it's not necessary yet. And as an enterprise matter, it hasn't been presented to them in line to their processes to safely and appropriately be used,
Yeah.
but it will. So agree with everything. It just, and I think this is general in the conversations I'm having. There's a lot of disagreement over timelines, and I think everybody's right and everybody's wrong. It just all depends on that company, that particular technology or method, when it can be safely implemented, those sorts of things. But I do agree, the agents method surrounding or overlaying generative AI, at least as we currently instantiate it, is absolutely the way to get to that module of a process and apply it appropriately. Still with that, again, that auditability, probabilistic auditability, I think that's really a key thing. How that's decomposed, the agentic platforms that are arising, and even the use in our core systems, how that's presented to us beyond co-pilot-like functionality into agent functionality. And then, of course, on the back end, we haven't touched on how this all changes the development, the configuration, the work that we're doing on the technology end. Huge benefits there. Definitely changing jobs, changing job roles. I think there is time for people to catch up and get with it. You know, at some point, the spreadsheet was going to kill the accountant. Didn't happen. But the accountant's job changed. The automobile did kill the buggy whip, but there are still millions of people, even just in the US, who are attached to the automotive industry. These things will persist, but the roles will change. And ultimately, that's a good thing, but it's a very disruptive thing along the way.
And from your perspective, I mean, you guys are you're leading us all there.
Well, we're at least along for the ride, but yeah, I would say it's fair to say, I agree with Manish that the disruption is now. And thank you for mentioning the McKinsey example, because every time somebody says PowerPoint, I get paid. But the construct of this disruption now, we've seen it in a couple of key areas. The construct of what I think a knowledge worker should do now, there's this giant sucking sound of, oh my God, I don't know, because this AI may change things. And then where it's showing up is kids coming out of college are having trouble finding jobs. Why? Because, well, maybe I could use the AI to do that. And knowledge workers who are later in career are struggling with transferring jobs because, wait a minute, the processes may change. That's a very painful disruption for a lot of people, and we need to recognize that. In the long term, I completely agree. The way technology will work, we're going to see more reliance on insightful activities, you know, using more creative and understanding how I look across a system or a process as a systemic level thinker, which means those kids coming out of college who are studying systemic thinking, spot on, they're in great shape to take opportunities in this new economy. But the immediate term is not necessarily as easy. I'll give you a very specific example that we're experiencing in Microsoft. It's a transformation of our own business. Developers in Microsoft, we've been public on this, so I can share. Developers in Microsoft are being shifted away from individual coders of individual programs. We're shifting our model towards full stack development. Does that mean why? It's because we want our software engineers to think like human beings and not like this piece of the process. And that's the main change we're seeing, is the more we can see that people who think more creatively, people who have the ability to adapt and actually think about what the problem is rather than what a solution I need to bring, those are the people who are going to win in all of this. That means the old folks who have senior experience are actually incredibly valuable because they know the system and they have the intuition and the insight. The younger folks who have the ability to think systemically will do really, really well. The challenge will be that's a huge transition in how we have trained people and how we have managed people's careers over the course of the last 20, 30 years.
So kind of tying it all together, last year we talked about, we still had a lot of people kind of doing a wait and see. You know, is this really going to come to fruition? Well, it's rapidly coming to fruition and changing a lot. What do you guys see in the next year, 5 years, 7 years, you know, as you kind of see, and why people should not be in a wait and see? They should start getting involved now. They should start leveraging the technology. Manish, kind of give your perspective first.
I mean, we all can agree, and 100%, I can tell you, I can bet my house on this thing that this will accelerate. So whatever the speed at which it's going to get faster, number one. Number two, I think that agents are going to be very pervasive. There is some estimate by 2030 there will be 25 million agents across the various different industries doing the actual production business cycles. So agents have landed, you embrace or not. And most importantly, I think there will be winners and losers. Just like when there was an internet, online, e-commerce started, just like any other trend has started. And almost always, this kind of things as a lot of unknowns. The only way to know and get familiar with those unknowns is actually doing it rather than just talking about it. In my favorite sentence is, you want to learn swimming, you got to get in the water at some point. And the longer you take, the longer it will for you to really understand that what it takes to swim.
Bob?
Yeah. I think it will, I agree that it will speed up, but I think it will also become more familiar, so it will become less scary as things just settle in, standards arise, in our world, all the regs kind of settle in, but I think that pace will continue to accelerate. 25 million agents, 10 million agents, any way you slice it, there's going to be disruption there. I do think that the wait and see has become try and play, and also put a few things in production, but what's in production tends to be advisory, research, summarization, document comparison, and again, that's okay. That's a win. There's business value in that. We shouldn't feel a sense of pressure or shame, well, we should be doing more. Well, we can do more, we will do more as these things begin to settle out. I definitely am in a mindset, and I've been saying probably too often, revolutionary technology applied in an evolutionary manner, but sometimes evolution happens fast. Darwin taught us that. Sometimes it takes a while. Both tracks are okay.
And Jim, final word.
What they said.
Well said.
All right, join me in thanking these three gentlemen for their great insights.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.